So, good morning viewers, and welcome to our webinar on Mobilising Enterprise. My name is Rick Hoy and I'm the CEO of iApps. Firstly, wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us for our monthly iApps webinar. Today we're going to take a look at everything and anything to do with the world of mobility. Today we are talking to two men at the forefront of leading the IBM software group in their mobility strategy and delivering the best that IBM has to offer to mobile application developers throughout the world. I'm of course talking about Brett Nulf, Sales Lead in Worklight and Growth Markets, and Marvin Malcolm, who's the Technical Sales Lead in Worklight. Today we will be discussing with Brett and Marvin the lessons they have learnt in mobilising enterprise and the experience and hurdles and solutions they've encountered along the way, and also their top considerations on integrating mobile solutions. So first, let me introduce Marvin Malcolm. Marvin, thank you very much for joining us today. Could you please quickly tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you very much, Rick. Yeah, I've been in IT for probably about nearly 20 years now. I hail from sunny England, a place called London, I'm sure you all know. And I suspect the majority of the time that I've been working in IT, I have been doing integration of some sort. Basically, just exposing organizations' data and allowing them to, or users to interact with that data. And it's kind of interesting that mobility is now just another facet of exposing that data and providing insights into that to people around the world. So it's great to be in a technology industry. It's one that's moving very fast and one that I can barely keep up with. But it's great to be on this call.
Fantastic. Marvin, thank you very much. So Marvin, you're calling in from Sydney. I'm sitting here on the lovely Sunshine Coast, which is today the weather's more like your hometown of London. And joining us in Melbourne, I'd like to introduce Brett Nulf. Brett, how are you? I think you're calling in from Melbourne. I think the weather's probably the same as what we're experiencing here on the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, the weather's terrible. We're going to get rain all day. And but I'm from Michigan in the U.S. originally, which is normally a lot colder than this during the winter, so it's fine with me.
Fantastic. So, Brett, tell us a little bit more about your past and what you're doing now with IBM, quickly.
Sure. My past is like Marvin goes way back. I started off in the U.S. Working for 8 years for a systems integrator. I worked in the U.K. for about 10 years, about Italy, and I also started a company in the mobility space back in 2000. So I've been writing mobility and working in this sector for about a decade now. Eventually sold the company and then came back into IBM to run the mobility inside IBM, inside what we call our growth markets, which is the sort of most interesting markets to work in, certainly Australia, but also Asia Pacific, Latin America, Africa, which is one of the fastest growing markets in the world for mobile, and Central Europe. So it's a great space to work in.
Fantastic. That's excellent. Great. So what I just want to point out quickly to the viewers, you can join in on this conversation. You'll notice next to your video screen a chat portal. So feel free to post any questions or comments you might have, and we'll endeavour to answer them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so gentlemen, straight into it. Let's ask the first question. We'll work out who wants to answer each one as we go along, or if we've both got comments on them. The first question was, what impact has the increase in consumer ownership of mobile devices had on the traditional enterprise and their business models?
You want to kick off on that, Brett?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Well, clearly it's an area that's very fast growing, and no one has put up any slides to show the increase in the use of smartphones and mobile devices. We see it everywhere we go, just walking down the street. There's very high penetration rates in Australia, as well as places like Singapore and Hong Kong. And a lot of them originally were, the first to take off were iPhones, but now you have the Samsungs, the Android versions, and even still Microsoft and BlackBerry have their own niches. The impact is really initially the retail space, the retail sector utilized, saw the potential, started making consumer-facing applications that they put into the Apple iStore and so forth in the Android marketplace. But over time, the people have been starting to look internally and realizing that there's actually a lot of efficiencies to be gained in their own organization. How do I apply mobility to really every division within my group? Where can I drive efficiencies? Where can I transform the way I'm doing business today? Simple business processes. Take an insurance application. Normally, when you're off doing claims adjusting, when you're reviewing an accident or a site that's been hit with a cyclone, you will be walking around with a clipboard and a piece of paper and a pen. But now you can use these devices to transform how that works. You can use for instance, the camera to take a picture of the disaster site. You can use the camera to take a picture of someone's driver's license, so there's no loss of data. You can use the audio recording capability to record testimonials from witnesses. You can automatically get information about, say, the weather and the location of the site by having the app automatically capture that information. All of this data travels along to the system of record and is persisted so that you can use that later to process claims more rapidly and or even in a court of law should it come to that. So the use of mobile and the unique features of these handsets are fascinating to think about. How does it apply to my current business process? How does it transform the way I'm doing things today?
Fantastic. All right. Well, look, Marvin, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. So, if you look at, for example, with banking, there is a lot of things that are changing in the way that people feel about banking. So now, particularly the age range or demographic of 24 to 44, they are looking to drive, much different types of interactions. The older ones, they're happy to still go into branches, and even now, a lot of them are saying, well, okay, now I can get on the internet because that's coming more commonplace. So one of the key things is that people are always on. Even if they're at the dinner table at a restaurant, people expect to be able to interact. I need to be able to look and see what's on my device, see what my balance is, see what's going on, see what my friends are doing. So it's now more than just viewing and being a consumer of information. People actually want to be part of that and want to be inside it. So businesses need to look at different scenarios rather than just saying, hey, let me present you some information, as typically we've done with the web, and saying, well, how can I get people to actually interact with me? So the models that they need to incorporate are now different, because it's more than just providing information. It's actually about engaging people, making things very sticky so people don't, people who are fickle don't go off and go to somebody else. If you look at what was happening with on Black Friday in the US, 24% of consumers were using mobile devices to go and shop. So things are really changing in the way that organizations have to present themselves and the way that they present themselves to consumers in the outside world. So there's a lot of changes going on. People are instrumented, people are connected, and the balance of power is shifting, I guess I could say. So consumers are now smarter than they were before, and they're not just smarter, but their expectations are higher. They want convenience, they want service. So there's a lot of things that are changing, and businesses have to be part of that. They need to understand that in order to maintain our market share and to be effective in the marketplace, they really need to step up and understand these challenges, understand these requirements, and fulfill those requirements.
Oh, Fantastic. Okay, Marvin, we seem to have your camera seems to have dropped a bit. You might be you're sitting a bit lower in the picture.
Yeah.
There we go. There he is.
Exactly. Oh,
Fantastic. Sorry, you're back with us. All right, so fantastic. Okay, well, I'll go straight into question number 2. And Marvin, while you're on, we might as well get you straight into that. What are some of the biggest challenges that enterprises have in embracing mobility solutions?
Oh, now, where do you start?
Yeah, it's a long list.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, one of the first and one of the biggest things that people have is the area of security. People are genuinely nervous with all things online, I guess is one way to look at it. You know, I'm one of those people who are, you know, I'm always very cautious. I tell my family, particularly my kids, you know, be very cautious about what you do online. Be very cautious because there are bad people out there and they're always looking to do something. So security is something that is very prevalent. Protecting your information, protecting confidential information is something, you know, if you've got information on your smartphone, and, you know, I'm one of those people, you know, previous to the smartphone that I have, the phone that I had before, I had lost 3 times. And 3 times I'd managed to find that phone. You know, one was in the lost property down at Qantas at Sydney Airport, and a number of places. One, a guy, you know, got onto my phone, found out, and gave me a call. I had to go and pick the phone up. So losing your phone now, in those days, it wasn't a smartphone. It was a nice phone, but it wasn't a smartphone. So I didn't have any confidential information on there. But nowadays, you can have confidential information, and losing that could mean exposing a lot of your information to people who shouldn't have that. So that's one of the things that's very important. Another thing that's very important as well is the complexity of application development. You know, if you think about what was happening on the web, you know, you put up a web screen, you had some challenges because people have different browsers. You know, Internet Explorer was the de facto one, I guess. And as long as you managed to get it running on IE, typically it would run on the other platforms because they were typically better. But now with smartphones, as Brett was saying earlier, and you've got Android coming in now. BlackBerry have kind of lost the lead that they once had. And the iPhone really took off and really brought this to where it is now. But the number of devices that people have, because people now are in a position where, okay, so the iPhone was there, it was number one for a while, but you know, there are a lot of other options. You know, I took home a Nokia phone and gave it to my wife and said, yeah, have a look at this and see what you think about it. And she played with it for a while and she said, I really like it. I said, do you prefer it to, because she's got a Nexus 4. I said, do you prefer it to the Nexus 4? She said, yeah, I do, which surprised me because, you know, a lot of people, if you read the press, a lot of people say, well, the iPhone is the number one and Android number 2 potentially, and Microsoft are a distant third. But there are a lot of things to like about it. So I think we'll see that more and more people are buying and purchasing and choosing lots of different devices, which means you need to be able to support that as a business. Now, what does that mean for your development, your IT department? Well, it means a lot more. You've got to do a lot of testing to support these. You know, your life cycle, your development life cycle becomes more complex. So that's another area that I think people are really going to struggle with. And then, you know, the new business models, the way that changes, these are something that you need to start thinking about because, you know, you're on anytime and anywhere. You need to be able to, you know, take those transactions. You need to be able to process those transactions. You need to understand that, you know, maybe there are issues to do with location. What does that mean for me as a business? So the whole business model is changing. So a lot of things are going. So security, the top concerns, the cost of developing mobile applications, that's another big concern. Integrating to cloud services, you know, a lot of things are going on.
I can maybe add to that. The security is a concern. Banking in particular, it's become one of the issues. It's become an expectation now. Mobile banking is becoming a de facto requirement, sort of hygiene factor for all the retail banks out there. It's a bit like when ATMs were introduced, say 30 years ago. It was all brand new at the time, but now you can look back and say, no retail bank in their right mind does not have an ATM network. So everyone assumes that mobile banking is there, that's available from on my handset, and I want to be able to do transactions, not just look at a bank account balance. I want to be able to move payments around. I want to be able to pay utilities and so forth. So it really has to be addressed full on. We did a lot of work in all kinds of markets. In Africa, for instance, we worked with a system called M-Pesa, which is run by the local mobile operator there. And you can make payments, peer-to-peer payments between one person and another in remote locations using really nothing more than SMS, using a series of challenges and responses, knowledge-based authentication, and so forth. It does not necessarily require a high-tech answer. It really just requires a design for security. You have to assume that these devices will get lost. You will encounter Mr. Mouse's problem of leaving in a taxi or an airport sooner or later. In the case where enterprises have a bring your own device a design approach or a principle that allows the employees to bring their own devices, you find that almost 50% of companies have a security issue at some point along the way. So when you consider how to build the application, you have to consider the data on the handset absolutely must be encrypted. Any data store should be encrypted. Any data going across the network during that transport should be encrypted. Encryption all the way back to the handshake with the system of record in the back end. That said, there are opportunities around security. Security actually can be used to increase, mobile can be used to increase the security of a system by incorporating the use of a secondary digital channel as a multi-factor authentication. What does that mean? It means that in sort of the old classic world of PC websites, when you set up the user in the first place, they may have to authenticate on that PC web application, but you should also challenge them on a second channel, like sending an SMS with a code to their phone, to which they must respond correctly. And that gives you an additional comfort level that that user is who they say they are, that they in fact own the devices that they say they own, and that they can be authenticated and trusted properly. So, while it's a challenge, it also makes a big opportunity for us to leverage mobile for these kinds of use. There's a potential to understand a lot more about the users as well by their usage of multiple channels or omni-channel. We can see more about how they're using it, how they're using the service, how they're interacting with my service, and use that information to help build more personalized capabilities and offerings to end users.
Fantastic. Okay.
One other thing I'd like to say, Rick, is that often people forget that an elephant in the room, so to speak, is actually integration. People think I can just develop this really cool interface and it will wow the public, but if you're not able to integrate that with the key or core systems and be able to expose that data so that they can see it, then pretty much people will look at the app and it'll be nice for a couple of weeks, but after a while the shine is gone. They've got no real use for it. There's no real compelling reason for them to continue to interact with it, and then they'll stop using it. So that's another thing that you really need to pay attention to.
I mean, I think that probably why it accounts for the 1.5 million apps we have on the App Store alone is that we see some amazing applications being written, and we use an example with some of our clients. And in Australia, we call them, I think it's Hungry Jack's in Australia and Burger King in the rest of the world. This is a prime example of a very good app that missed the mark in that it was good on the consumer face, but it didn't connect to the back end. Just to cut a long story short, we managed to shut down a Burger King or a Hungry Jack's in Australia for about 15 minutes one day because the staff just didn't know how to interact with the app that had been built for the public. It worked extremely well. It got us in, it got us engaged, and then it hit the front and hit operations, and the whole thing stopped. And that is, I think, exactly what you just said there, Marvin. You've got to make sure that there's a reason for both ends, for the business and for the consumer. And unless the two are tied together, it's not going to work. It's just, it might as well be what we call the, the idiot app, that we've all seen. All right, so let's jump straight on to number 3. If you were to pick one application, innovative mobility solution, what would it be that you've seen or have used, and what did the organisation gain out of it?
Ooh, just choosing one.
Yeah. I'm conscious of it's 11:22, and I thought I'm going to try and shorten it down to one each.
I guess one of the I'll group them together in more than in one, but for me, one of the most innovative is the whole area of augmented reality. The ability to use the device and to start to use that to overlay information so that people get real context-aware information for what they're doing. IBM, back in 2010, did an application for the Wimbledon tennis competition. The project was called SEER, and what it allowed you to do was to hold up the phone, and when you pointed at something, it would give you an overlay that told you more information about what you were actually looking at. And so, you could have information on, how long is the queue for the taxi rank, and, if you were to head in this particular direction, what amenities would be there? Where is the nearest toilet? Where are the nearest restaurants? Putting it over the particular court, for example, would allow you to get a live stream for the court, also give you stats on the players who are playing on the court and things like that. You've got situations where organizations are able to allow you to point your phone at some items in a grocery store, for example, and get information about that item. Brett was showing me just the other day a slide of a shop which basically had no real items in the store, but they just had a list of things on the wall which you just held your phone over, and you could then start to purchase stuff on that. So the model is changing, and I think augmented reality is one of those really nice, for me anyway, compelling uses of mobile devices to actually provide real additive data to someone's experience. I think that's for me is one of the best.
I agree. All right.
Yeah, in some cities you see a lot of the QR stores. They're just people just walk down the street, put a poster up on the hoarding on the side of the street, which is basically a catalog of stuff to buy, and a QR code by each one of them right next to the picture. It allows you as a innocent pedestrian to just go and point your camera at it, take a snapshot of it, get the scan, and then place an order already, and it shows up at your house straight away. So that requires absolutely no investment in terms of retail space, and it could, those are the types of things that can transform entire industry. That kind of cutting technology. I can mention an application that we built in the U.S. actually with Capital One. Capital One is back to banking again, but retail banking. They've done a couple of really interesting, innovative features that makes them very leading in the market. One is peer-to-peer payments. So if you've just bought a pizza together with your mate, and you wanted to split the bill and pay your half to your friend, what you can do is use your phone to make the payment. Now, it uses a technology which feels like it's near-field communication. It feels like you basically take two phones and you bump them together. So you just push them together like this, and it allows you then to make that transfer. So, but near-field communication has just really hit the streets quite recently. Not every handset has this. And Capital One recognizes that they wanted to have the full market, the full addressable market to have this functionality. So they use a thing called the Bump API. The Bump API basically is like a poor-man's NFC. It uses a couple of technologies. It uses the GPS, so it knows where I am. It uses the accelerometer, so it knows that I'm actually shaking the handset. And then it also knows that I'm a Capital One member. Now, if the system sees that there's two people both in the same location, both shaking their phones at the same time, and are both Capital One members, it can conclude that maybe there's a transaction being sent. And so what happens then is it pops up on the screen a PIN number request. You enter it, and then you're off. You can make a transfer of payment between people. So it's a very cool technology, peer-to-peer payments using technology which is on really everyone's handsets, GPS and accelerometers.
Fantastic.
It also in the U.S., in the same app, they have remote data capture for checks. So if you get a check from your grandma for your birthday, you can take a picture of the check front, turn it over, take pictures of the back, throw the check away, and hit submit, and it will go into the bank, and it will be processed faster than if you had the paper check. So those are kind of fun, innovative services from one particular customer.
No, great. That's some good stuff. We've looked at Bump a few times for some of our clients in Australia, and I agree. It's where it's narrowed down by some of these technologies. Bump was sort of making it available across multiple platforms, and I think that's something that's important in the future when you're looking at integrating. Malcolm, you brought it up earlier. We've got a plethora of different devices coming to the marketplace. There's a lot of manufacturers going to try and add into this marketplace because they see the value. That's going to make it more and more difficult. And we've got to try and make sure that when we're talking with our clients that we're ensuring that they get the broadest delivery to the largest market from whatever project we put together. So this brings me on to question 4. CYOD is a potential solution for BYOD challenges. Do you think that this is a viable alternative for the enterprise? Malcolm?
So, IT has always had these acronyms. It brings them out anytime any new technology comes out. There are new buzzwords. I guess we probably should explain what these are. BYOD, everyone knows, bring your own device. It's owned by the user, and they use it wherever they want. CYOD is a newer one. I mean, it was coined, I forget who coined the phrase last year, but it was choose your own device. So these are pre-approved devices that potentially are owned by the company, not always, and they can be used anywhere. Now, there are some new ones as well that, when I was looking into this a little while ago, that have come on the board. CLOE, corporate liable employee owned. Here, the company pays the bills, but the employee owns the phone. And COPE, or corporate owned personally enabled, these allow personal use of corporate devices. So, if your corporation gives you a device, then you are allowed to do personal things on those devices as well. Now, these devices are becoming mission critical. So the challenge that organizations will have is that as people start to use them more and more, they rely on them more and more. So if I've brought in my own device and, for whatever reason, my own device gets lost or whatever, then sometimes I am unable to fulfill my actual function, my job role. So organizations need to start thinking about how they deal with those situations. And it could be now that they say, well, we have a pre-approved set of phones or set of devices that you can use. If you lose yours or someone steals yours, then we will be able to provide you with one of ours that will substitute until you get yours back or until it's repaired or whatever. So there are challenges and so on that are there. Intel did a survey last year, and one of the things they said is that the majority of their employees would rather choose their own device than bring their own into work. So I think we've gotten to a situation where, because employees have been slow to take up mobility and the benefits that it has, employees have started bringing their own in and helping themselves to become more productive. But, you know, if you think about it, if your employee was to say, here is the latest smartphone or device, we'd like you to use that to enable you to be more productive, I suspect a lot of people would be pretty happy with that.
Yep.
And if there were ways that we could, ensure that you have some level of partitioning between personal and corporate use, then that is something that I think people would readily take to. So I think CYOD, choose your own device, is actually a viable alternative. And I suspect that's the way the industry is going to go more and more. You know, if you think about it, technology changes quite quickly. Not everybody, I mean, we've seen the situation now where it's the early adopters who have taken on and been bringing in the devices. They're the ones who are going to continually be refreshing their devices and get new devices. The majority are going to get a device and stick with it for 2-3 years. So those are the sort of refresh rates that many organizations go with their own devices anyway. So I suspect that over time, the ability to choose, as long as you keep those choices up to date and relevant, then I think it's a viable option.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the BYOD approach is often embraced to save as much money as possible. The company looks at their employee base, whether they're a retailer or a manufacturer, and they see that almost everyone has one of these already, and so they take advantage of that. And the same can be said the other way around. Anyone who has a decent smartphone has certain expectations. The expectations start small. They say, can I get on my corporate email? Can I get on my corporate calendar? Can I see the task list? Can I get directory lists? And eventually it expands and expands into things like HR systems, supply chain systems, and customer relationship management and so forth. So, you know, over time you see a whole variety of different types of applications on BYOD and CYOD type applications. There's some specialization going on. You know, often we're seeing a lot of customers that are buying the source tablets, in particular iPads, but also Android tablets, for certain of their stakeholders, sales teams, for instance. So they will create a catalog application or a relationship management application or a Salesforce automation application or something that combines many of these together, including, whether the customer has critical situations in the past or whether their subscriptions or policies are expiring and need to be reordered. You know, all of these different backend systems are put into a single application that's optimized for an iPad or a tablet, and then the sales team can bring the system to the customer meeting, and they get excellent results because the iPad looks great. The application is very visual. It has a full catalog of information. You can see pictures of what you're trying to sell, you know, great amount of detail, including maybe PDFs and videos of whatever products you have, potentially even a CAD/CAM drawing that you can use your finger and rotate. So it's quite a common use of BYOD, where the CYOD, where the company is buying the devices and issuing them to the end users. Executive dashboards is another one. They often buy tablets for the execs so they can do decision support, you know, just before they board an airplane. Knowledge-based type applications where there's a field service engineer and they need a lot of information. They need to be able to see a bill of materials or an exploded view of a complex assembly and allow them to troubleshoot tools. Those are really ideally fit for a tablet, and will often source the tablets for those kinds of applications. Finally, we're also seeing ruggedized. So we're seeing ruggedized infrastructure such as, you know, what used to be the old Windows CE devices. Nowadays, you can get Android devices and even iPhones that are more ruggedized, and they're used for industrial applications where you're going to be facing weather for weather conditions, maybe dropping the phone, or you're traveling consistently and you're going to have it get beat up a bit. So those ruggedized applications, the use of ruggedized hardware is still very important, and again, another reason that the company buys sources of the device for their use.
Yep.
and one other thing that is changing as well, maybe not changing, but people are starting to think about is, we've spoken about mobile data device management, and actually locking down a device. Well, also now organizations are thinking about mobile application management as an alternative to that. So if you can't lock down a device with some of the BYOD things, you may struggle to get that. But if you can put an application on the device and manage the application, manage the security of that data, and if necessary, be able to wipe the data off and the application off that device, that's another option for organizations.
Yep, most definitely. No, some good information there. I mean, it's again, I think, Malcolm, you said it earlier. I mean, there's just so much to mobility, and I think it's probably potentially why I think all of us are probably spending a huge amount of time on education. This brings us to this next question. It's quite loaded in that, how have you seen mobility or the mobility space mature? And now I know that there's a post-mobility, and we talk about the Windows devices. And then all of a sudden, in 2008, we start to see the iPhone and the Apple iOS come in, and then Android and all these other areas. But so this question, you could probably take 2 hours to answer this next one. But what would if you were to try and look at probably the top 3 things that you have seen mature in the past couple of years? So even if we just take from 2010 to now, the last 3 years, what do you think?
I can maybe take that.
Sorry, I apologise.
I think flip a coin. We see a trend in thinking away from the rethinking the ability to produce apps and industrialize the production of these apps. The initial apps that every enterprise comes up with is they're usually the first step, and they're dipping their toe in the water, trying to find out what mobile can do and what it can't do. And then the second app, they're extending it, and they're adding more transaction integrity and so forth. And then there's a third app, and then there's a fifth app, and then there's a 10th app. And over, say, 3 years, you'll end up with 20 or 30 or even 50 apps. And people are recognizing that now. So what they're trying to do is understand, how do I industrialize the production of these apps? How do I make it so it becomes a machine? Just like web apps 20 years ago, when the first concepts of J2EE servers came out. And they needed to find ways of ruggedizing the production process. And we're seeing a trend maybe towards more mini apps, if you will. So instead of having one big monolithic app that takes 6 months to produce and it has 100 pages, and then you roll it out in a big bang, now we're seeing more capability to produce smaller, functional, task-oriented applications that are produced in 4 weeks and rolled out quickly. And then they put it, they come up with some other ideas, they make another app, they roll that one out, where they continually supplement them. And cloud services contribute to this, but also the whole process around developing, for instance, using hybrid technology means the development process is a lot faster. So the creation of these mini apps and the making a high volume quantity where they're just rolled out all the time, especially for employee-facing applications, is a big trend. I think a second trend is the taking advantage of the data. The data that these applications are producing can consistently add value. You see not just that the user is using it, that is, when is it downloaded, what time of day is it, how many people are downloading it, but you can actually look inside the application and find out where are users going inside the menu structure of the application. Are they going to the left? Are they going to the right? Are they utilizing the full application at its maximum capability? Are they struggling at any point? They have a point where they stop at a single page. Page 7, there's always a problem. And people just drop off into the abandoned shopping carts on page 7. Can we use that information about where the user is going inside the application, not only for making determinations about where to put our investments for further development, but also potentially troubleshooting short-term trends where there's an issue and actually getting a customer service response. Those are a couple key areas we're seeing a lot of development very soon.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and also, one of the areas I think they're starting to mature in is the actual use of the capabilities of the device as well. So now you're starting to build applications that maybe implement security based on location. If you think about a healthcare worker, if they're actually in the hospital vicinity, then they may have full access to data. Whereas if they're out on the field working with a particular patient, then they may only have a restricted access to some of that data. So you're looking at the device and saying, well, what can the device do now, rather than just thinking, well, I've got a screen that I can present data on, is, well, actually, this device can actually do a lot more than just doing that. You can start to take note of what's going on around you. So, for example, if, you're trying to present some targeted promotion at an individual, you may want to look at, well, what is the weather like where that individual is? If the weather's hot, then maybe I can offer them a promotion for a soft drink or something like that. Whereas if it's cold, maybe I offer them a chai latte or something like that. So there's use of the devices and understanding how the device works and what the capabilities of that device are, and extending that to provide additional value to the application.
Fantastic. Okay, so on to the next question. Moving along. So I think, interesting question, because a lot of people may not see this, but mobility actually encompasses more than just the smartphones and tablet devices. So what other mobility solutions have you seen appear in the marketplace in the last couple of years? And I'll direct this firstly to Malcolm.
So I think the whole machine-to-machine concept is becoming, very, very common now. If you think about some of the scenarios that are going, St. Jude, at St. Jude Hospital here in Australia, St. Jude Hospital, medical clinicians, they monitor and manage, heart and pacemaker patients from their home. So, you actually can monitor the rhythms or the pace of the person's heart. That transmits to a mobile device. That mobile device then transmits the information to the hospital, and then you start to be able to monitor that person. So maybe there are fewer visits that patient has to make into the hospital. So and the use of telemetry is I guess key for this. If you think about HTTP is a technology that's been around for a long while, but it's actually quite heavyweight and not particularly suited to small devices, even mobile devices that we carry around, smartphones. They're quite heavyweight. So you have people like Facebook who use the MQTT protocol for machine-to-machine interaction. And IBM is certainly using that a lot in the way that it produces solutions that go inside cars, for example. So if you have a scenario where multiple cars are in a particular area and those cars are transmitting data, it could be that there is a particular incident in that area, and you need to be able to respond to that. So the use of machine-to-machine devices, small devices to mobile to base stations and so on, is an area that we're seeing a lot more take up in, and particularly with some of the new, Sprint Velocity application is a platform for automotive solutions, and it allows you to, you're walking up to your phone, and from your smartphone you can turn on the engine of the car. When you get into the car can process your emails and speak your emails to you, and read them out as you're traveling, driving along, and allows you to interact with people. So there's a lot of things that's going on, which I think are quite exciting, and just show the way that mobility is being tackled in a number of different scenarios. Even soldiers on the ground are using it for very, very useful reasons.
Brett,
the key consideration for design in these M2M situations is as Marvin was saying, make the protocol as lightweight as possible. You have to assume it's a narrowband connection. You have to assume the battery is small, and and the CPU power is small. So you can control the facilities in the building. The thermostat on the wall should be able to tell a central console when the room is getting too hot or when there's a flood of fluid. To extend those use cases that were mentioned earlier, it's used often in hospitals and in health. It's used in emergency services, addressing the right resource to the right places at the right time based on, automatically detected flooding or something like that. Cash point machines, ATM machines, can sort of bark out help when there's an issue or there's a burglary attempted. That lightweight narrowband technology is designed to protect the battery and the data consumption. And we've actually used that same technology to put it into normal mobile apps, day-to-day mobile apps. One of the key reasons that applications get low ratings on app stores is because of battery burn. Battery burn. It's something that you don't think about when you're developing the application. It doesn't even occur to most developers to be worried about battery. But if you look through 1 star out of 5 applications, you'll find there's a lot of comments usually that I deinstalled the app because I got a massive phone bill at the end of the month, or I deinstalled the app because I think it's just killing my battery. And those are things that you can use the same technology we use for M2M in normal everyday consumer apps.
No, I completely agree with that, and it's something we've learned over the last 4 years. And seen on multiple occasions with applications that we use ourselves. Some of the burns on people's account. We had a young kid in our office one day walk in saying he'd just been presented with a $900 phone bill, and his previous month it was $44. And he's sitting there going, how am I going to pay this? And, who do you argue with? So I certainly know that application went, and he never put it back on his phone again. So, all right, going straight in because we're running out of time. Going into number 7. If you could give any advice to an enterprise embarking on their mobility journey, what would it be? And Brett, I'll direct that one to you.
I think there's a couple things. One is, neglect security at your peril. We talked about this already, but the last thing you want is to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal with your CIO's name next to it saying this is a security breach and 127,000 applications went out over the air with a data store that had in clear text the user ID and password. So you don't want that to happen because, for a variety of reasons. Make sure you consider that. You want to make sure there's an ROI, a good study of your business value for the business. They don't have to be massive, complex studies, but you want to make sure that you can consider the use of many different applications over time, affecting lots of different parts of the organization. You can look at one application at a time to kick off, but keep the vision that you'll have many applications by all kinds of stakeholders in the organization. They'll all come out of the woodwork asking you for ideas about what they want to do with mobile. And ensure that you have a good strategy in place to deal with change, very, very rapid change over time. Think of maybe a total age of an application, if it does well, is say 3 years. And in the course of 3 years, we know full well that these device versions are going to be changing pretty much continually. Apple comes out with iOS 7. Android comes out with some ice cream sandwich, some new dessert every couple of weeks. And the form factors are still changing. Every time Apple comes out with something new, the resolution on the device actually changes. It feels like it's the same app potentially, but now we have different resolution sizes and we have to consider that. So when you're building the application, think 3 years, think 20 apps. Consider these things over long periods so that you can make sure that your mobility strategy, the infrastructure, and the process that you're going through is capable of industrializing the whole process.
Great.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, Brett mentioned, security, and it's because it's something that's so foremost on people's mind. It can kind of inhibit you from putting something out. So you need to be able to balance security with usability. Take into account what style of app it is. I mean, if it's something that is banking, something that's got a high monetary value associated with it that people really are concerned about, then you need to maybe go that extra mile. But maybe you can think about balancing security with usability and understanding how that goes. Consistency across the platforms as well is something I think that is important. You know, you don't want to have a great user experience on iOS and then on any other platform, really you just got a second rate, which all you're doing is showing information. You want to try and get consistency across all the platforms. We mentioned not trying to put too much in one app, but that's important. And also remember that there is a whole development life cycle that goes along with building applications. It's not just about a screen. You've got to think about the design, the development, the integration. One of the things that we had many years ago, there was when the web really took off, was the whole issue to do with things like SQL injections and so on. Mobile apps are going to face exactly the same problem. So you need to understand that when you're going through your cycle, you need to do that certification on your application to make sure that it is robust and resilient against attacks of any. So those sort of lessons that we've learned as well. Analytics is going to be one of the key areas that you shouldn't also forget, because Brett mentioned earlier, your app has got a low rating in the App Store. Why has it got a low rating in the App Store? Do you know why people are not using it? Well, they may make a few smart comments on underneath the application, but reality is you're probably not going to get the real true reason why that's happening. And the use of analytics to be able to say, well, how did the person navigate? Where were the challenges? Those sorts of things are things that you ought to be thinking about, that we need to incorporate that in what we do, so that in case we get challenged, we can make our app better a lot faster than by not doing anything. So those are some of the things I think are important for people to remember. It's not a whole new world. People have been developing applications for many years. You need to incorporate some of those same practices, continuous integration and so on, in mobile as well.
I think, Malcolm, that what you just finished off was really important. Apps, the word app may be a new word and it may be a new acronym, but the simple fact of the matter is we have been building software for many, many years, and I think people mustn't lose sight. It may be a bit easier, but we still mustn't lose sight of the fact that it is a complex plan that you're going to do, and you need to give it the suitable amount of weight in consideration. You must design it well. So the same considerations we were using to build applications 10 years ago needs to be brought to apps that are going onto mobile devices. Okay, look, guys, we have one question here from Jeff, and he asked how BYOA is impacting on the enterprise and what needs to be done. Malcolm, do you want to see if you can comment on that?
So that's a new acronym on me.
Yeah,
it's not one that I've really come across.
So
bring your own Apple.
Bring your own application.
Yeah.
Bring your own app. I assume that's better.
We're starting to see it in, if you think about the use of technologies such as Dropbox, technologies such as Google Apps, and some organizations are allowing people to interact with other people using those capabilities. So whilst they may not be on the approved list for an organization, there is some tolerance to doing some of that. Now, I know certainly within IBM there are a number of challenges that we face with doing that. Primarily with the exposure of corporate confidential information to outside parties, And that is something that I guess you need to be very careful with, and inspect your corporate policy to understand whether that's something that you can do. Certainly, I was in a situation recently where one of the grads that has come in to IBM, and I was working with him, and he was saying, we had to collaborate on an application, and he said, "Oh, should we just put it on, in a Google app, and let's work on it collaboratively?" And I said, "We could do, but unfortunately, we're not allowed because there's confidential information in this document, and we're not really allowed to go and share that outside of IBM." So there are places where it's valuable and it's useful, but I think you also have to understand what are the limitations and the risks of potentially doing that.
Brett, would you like to add to that?
No, it comes down, it's not so much to do with mobile or mobility, it has to do with the policies of the organization. There's massive benefits to be gained, and there's a lot of very innovative ideas out in the industry. Collaboration is it's a great thing. You don't you use Facebook and LinkedIn every day, but if you look at internal facing uses of that, we have a very strong usage of collaboration technologies in our team, where every time someone comes up with an idea or a question, you post it, come back the next day, and you've got answers. So we're sort of voracious users of that technology. Wikis and even things like voice over IP can save the company a lot of money. It's just a matter of really what is the corporate policy, trying to align that so it adheres to both security policy, but also some sort of standardization. Collaboration only works if everyone is on the same system or to interact with the same system. So there needs to be some thinking sort of at the CIO level, making sure that there's some guidelines and how these utilities are to be used. Some organizations are very free to use things like Dropbox. On the other end of the spectrum, there's other organizations where you can't even give a USB thumb drive to transfer documents between one laptop and another. They don't even allow that. Often you are banned or barred from using devices when you go in many customer environments. Like I have to leave my laptop in the hotel, and sometimes you bring these devices, and they'll actually put a piece of tape over the camera so that you're not allowed to walk around in sensitive areas. So it just comes down to corporate policies.
Yeah, no, I noticed I was in Singapore a few months ago, and we tried to go into the embassy for a meeting, and the iPad went, the laptop went, the phone went. They literally emptied our pockets out. We all felt very naked by the time we got into the meeting. And the hard part was we actually went to try and do our presentation, and of course we got nothing. So we're drawing on bits of paper, and we're returned back to the Ice Age to a degree.
Right.
We have one further question from Alex. If I developed an app and was to choose a platform, what would you recommend and develop on first? Apple, Android, Windows, BlackBerry, and why? So that's a pretty high-valued answer there, or question.
I wouldn't pick one. I mean, at the moment, I'd say you need to build for iOS and Android. And there are ways of doing that. I mean, depending on the style of app, you may use hybrid technology to do that. But I think with the 70% market share, an Android, you leave out Android, but then, iOS is typically high-value clients and so on. So I think those two are the ones that are most important. I think that Windows 8 style apps will probably pick up in time, but at the moment they're probably just at the second tier at the moment.
I should be contrarian and say you should go for BlackBerry first, right? You should build, or even Symbian, and it depends on what your app is, and it depends on the markets you're addressing. Places like Indonesia, BlackBerry still is #1 application. South Africa is the #1 application. There's a lot of places like India and China and so forth which have very large population of Symbian devices or J2ME-based applications, and they use SMS and they use USSD a lot. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. One thing to look at and consider is that there's a lot of options about how you build applications. So you might consider using the hybrid technology approach, which means that instead of developing specifically for one device platform using their local SDK, writing an Objective-C for Apple or Java with Google libraries for Android or C# or whatever, you can develop using hybrid technology, which is writing in HTML5 and CSS, and put that into a container, which is portable, and that allows you to have a great deal of portability between the different platforms. It de-risks the project to a large extent, and it also embraces a much larger skill population in the world. There's a lot more people that know how to build markup-based applications than there are that know how to build something for Windows 8. So that gives you a good way to start. And a lot of our applications are hybrid, and sometimes with a little bit of native technology inside the hybrid application. It's a combination. The Capital One example that I mentioned earlier that does the peer-to-peer payment using Bump API, 90% of their application is written with a hybrid approach, but they do have chunks that are specialized. Maybe either need some particular UI widget or some particular necessary requirement for speed or some integration to a third-party tool set. So, but again, you have the options about using all these approaches, and maybe it's a combination that makes most sense.
Yep, I think an approach at what you're trying to deliver is always the best policy. I mean, review what you're trying to achieve, where's your marketplace, what is the target audience. I mean, if you're developing purely and simply for Australia, you may make a different choice or take a different road. But if you're developing on a worldwide marketplace, then you've really got to spend some time on researching how you're going to approach that marketplace. So, guys, I really want to thank you very much. Sorry, Marvin.
Certainly for places like Africa, which are just emerging markets, as Brett was mentioning earlier, the use of just regular technology, regular phones, Symbian-style phones and so on, is going to be a big deal there, and they use it for payments right now.
Yep.
So, if you're building apps over there, then you need to understand who is going to be using those apps and how big a market do you actually want.
No, agreed. So, Marvin, I want to apologise to you. I've been calling you by your surname on a couple of occasions today.
Many people, even people that I work with, they may start off an instant messaging session and say, "Hi, Marvin," and at the end they'll say, "Thanks, Malcolm."
So it's the older ego.
I answer to all.
Yeah, I've had that often where they say, "Just don't call me ... So, yeah, Brett, Marvin, thank you very much. It's been a real privilege to have you guys on today and speaking about this. I think the people today will have gained a great deal of insight. Once again, thank you so much for attending today.
Thank you very much. And I also want to thank Brett for coming down and visiting. He's visiting us down in Australia from Hong Kong. Thanks for taking your time to join us on the call, Brett.
Absolutely. I love the weather. I come down all the time just for the weather. Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
All right, so thank you to everyone else that's taken the time to join us today. We've hoped that you've found this webinar and our talk with Brett and Marvin insightful. Hopefully it's helped you answer a few questions you might have had and how best potentially to integrate mobility solutions into your needs. Now, look, I'm sure that we may have actually encouraged more questions and prompted more thoughts. So we want to invite you, if you'd like to contact us at iApps, we can pass those questions back on to both Marvin and Brett, and outside of this webinar platform, get more answers back to you, or you can speak to us directly, and we'd love to answer more questions for you if you have any. So there'll be a full recording of the webinar put up on our website at iapps.net.au after this is finished, so you can watch it again or go through your leisure if there's some stuff you want to repeat. And look forward to seeing you next month at our next webinar. I'm not sure what the title is for that, but I'm sure we'll announce that through our newsletter that'll be going out again shortly. So thank you very much.